Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Rock and Roll Union Streamcast, guys. It is my pleasure to be joined by a bunch of great guys tonight. But before I introduce them, I just wanted to say a big shout out to our sponsor, Rosenfeld Dental Associates, located at 1095 Inman Avenue in Edison, New Jersey. Go rock your smile with the Rock Doc, David Rosenfeld. Voted one of the top dentists in 2021. Go check them out. Their number is scrolling on the bottom of the screen there. And let them know that Rock and Roll Union or CT sent you, and they'll take great care of you guys. Tonight, we continue with our preview of Vinyl Siding, which goes live May 14th. So we have two more preview shows, and then we're going to be running live with it. With me always is Bill. Tonight we have Mark McCarty, guitar player of Rat Rod, previous guitar player for various AC/DC outfits, and we also have Rick from Whole Lotta AC. We're going to be discussing Back in Black. We're going to be talking everything about that iconic album, the one that Bill's holding up for us, and same with Mark. So, Bill, can you give us a little bit of the prior history to this album?
Oh, there's quite a bit of prior history, actually. It was almost prophetic, I think, when Bon Scott sang, It's a long way to the top if you want to rock and roll, because it took about 6 years or so for AC/DC to get there, at least in the United States. The band started in 1973 by the Young brothers, Malcolm and Angus. Malcolm was 20 years old when the band started. Angus was 18. They were able to get rolling reasonably quickly in their native Australia because they were from a family that was effectively rock and roll royalty in Australia. Their older brother, George Young, was a member of the Easy Beats, got one of their albums here.
Wow.
The Easy Beats didn't ever really catch on in the United States. They had one minor hit, Friday on My Mind, which has become something of an iconic song over the years. But in Europe and in Australia, they were about as big as the Beatles. So they really did quite well for themselves. George Young and his partner from the Easy Beats, Harry Vanda, were able to get AC/DC their first record contract with Albert Productions in Australia in 1975, and they got their first album out, TNT, in early 1976. By the end of 76, the band were able to get an international recording contract with Atlantic, and they were able to get their first American album, High Voltage, which was basically a combination of their first two albums, released here. Atlantic didn't really push them very hard in the early days, though, because back in the middle 70s, there wasn't really a whole lot of hard rock happening in the United States. I mean, we were dealing with what I think retroactively we've been calling yacht rock, things like Steely Dan, the Eagles, Fleetwood Mac, plus disco was emerging, punk rock was emerging. It was a whole multitude of styles, but not really a whole lot of rock and roll, with two notable exceptions. Kiss had just broken through in late 1975 and Aerosmith in the middle of 75. So Atlantic, I think, decided to hedge their bets. They didn't really push AC/DC too hard. AC/DC's first American tour, in fact, wasn't until late 1977. And they started them very small. One of the first gigs AC/DC played in the United States was in New York at CBGB's, which, considering the punk rock scene in the late 70s, there's no way in hell that they would have fit in that place, but that's one of the places they played. By the end of 77 and into early 78, they were getting some traction in the States. They were getting good opening acts in the United States. They had gotten some good opening acts in 77 in Europe too. They had a tour where they opened for Black Sabbath in particular. So they were in a good position, Atlantic thought, to finally take off. By the end of 77 and into early 78, there was a little bit more in the way of rock and roll too. I mean, Kiss at that point were opening arenas. Aerosmith was too. The new wave of British heavy metal was starting out. Judas Priest was getting rolling. And although they didn't have their first album out yet, an American band from the LA area, Van Halen, was making noise. And they had a model that was something like AC/DC's, guitar-based rock and roll with some double entendres in the lyrics. So Atlantic at that point thought it was about the right time. And they pushed the next two albums from AC/DC at that point, Power Age and the live album, If You Want Blood, You Got It, pretty hard. Both of those albums kind of scraped the bottom end of the top 100, um, and didn't really sell a ton of records right out of the gate, but they did get noticed, and they got noticed especially as a live band. By the beginning of 1979, they were opening uh, arena shows and doing double bills. They did a rather famous double bill in early '79 with UFO here in the States, playing the arena circuit. And at that point, Atlantic thought they were pretty much ready. But one thing Atlantic wasn't crazy about was the production of their albums. They never particularly liked the sound, and they never really thought that Harry Vanda and George Young, who produced the albums, were very good at record production, as good as they were to work with. And so Atlantic basically came to the band with an ultimatum and said, "We'll push you in the United States, but you need a professional record producer." The guy they suggested was Eddie Kramer, who had a wonderful resume. Kramer had produced Jimi Hendrix. He had produced, or done recording engineering, I should say, for Led Zeppelin. He, at that point, had produced Kiss's live album. Kiss had also made Rock and Roll Over with him. So he was pretty well known at that point and was considered a fairly safe bet. Eddie Kramer and AC/DC did not get along at all. Um, Kramer did not like the band's sound. He, in particular, didn't like the way Bon Scott sang and said so. And the band obviously didn't like that very much. They ended up escalating to their manager and ultimately back to the record company and said, "We'll work with an outside producer, but you got to get someone we can work with." They ended up doing their next album, Highway to Hell, with Robert John Mutt Lange, who at that point wasn't really a big time record producer. He'd had a couple of hits with Graham Parker, with Bob Geldof and the Boomtown Rats, but he didn't really have a resume doing a whole lot beyond a few British artists, and really didn't have a resume doing hard rock at all. But he resonated with AC/DC. He worked very well with Bon in particular on getting his phrasing right, making it easier for him to breathe and deliver his vocals. And they just got on well. And the result, Highway to Hell, was a big success. It got to number 17 on the charts. Literally within weeks of its release, it went platinum. And the band went out, did a great tour to support it. And they were poised in the early part of 1980 to get together, get some songs written, and do a follow-up with Mutt Lange. Fast forward to late February of 1980, the unthinkable happens. Bon Scott goes out for a night of drinking with one of his buddies, ends up passing out in the back of his car after a significant amount of alcohol taken into his system, throws up, chokes on his own vomit, passes away. And people thought, that it was probably the end of the band. Bon Scott was an iconic lead singer, of course. Tremendous stage presence, very unique delivery. And it was a bit of concern on the part of the fans, and as well as on the part of the record company and the management. What are we going to do? Well, there was some discussion, particularly with Bon Scott's family, as well as within the band. They decided to continue. The question then became who to continue with. And relatively quickly, literally within a matter of a few weeks, they identified a candidate to potentially take Bon's place, that being Brian Johnson. Brian Johnson was an interesting choice because his name actually came from two different directions. Mutt Lange was well familiar with him. Brian Johnson had been working in Australia and in Great Britain for a number of years with his band Geordie. And they had a good reputation, although they hadn't really broken through as far as record sales. But more importantly, the Young brothers remembered that Bon Scott had, with his early band Fraternity, done a number of shows where Fraternity opened for Geordie. And so Bon and Brian Johnson knew each other. And Bon was very impressed with Brian Johnson's skills. Brian Johnson, according to Bon Scott, a voice like Little Richard. And Bon Scott absolutely loved Little Richard's delivery and his stage presence. So they decided to give Bon an audition. They gave some other guys auditions too, but they gave Brian Johnson serious attention. And literally within a matter of weeks, they decided not only to go forward with him, but to start recording immediately with him. It was literally, I think, within 6 weeks of Bon's death that it was announced that Brian was going to work with the band, and they went down to the Bahamas to Compass Point Studios to record the album. And from there, CT, I'll let you take the story as far as how the album plays song by song. I'll throw some comments in there as well, of course. And of course, Rick, Mark, do the same, definitely.
So one thing I wanted to do before we start going track by track, wanted to give our guests a little bit of a leeway to kind of introduce themselves, how they connect to that AC/DC fandom. And of course, Rick, you're in a whole lot of AC/DC, who a few weeks back actually did a show at McStew's with that Rock and Roll Union was helping promote. Rick, can you give us a little info on your band and how long you guys been together and that kind of thing?
Yeah, we've been together about 5 years now. Seems like 5 years. Sounds about right. we came together through a former drummer. He put us all together. We clicked very well, and then he had to part company with us for whatever reason. And we've been a pretty tight unit ever since with our current lineup. We played a couple theater shows here and there, a lot of bar shows. We did Bike Week in Wildwood 2 years in a row. And we're getting ready to do our summer tour, such as it is. Got a few dates up. So.
And how long have you been a fan of AC/DC? What makes AC/DC that band that you guys decided to tribute?
We're all just big fans of the band from way back. And the thing that makes our band a little unique is that each person in the band, the part they play, they are a fan of that person as well.
Oh, wow. Cool.
So, big Bon Scott fan, and our drummer Jerry is a very big Phil Rudd fan. He even has a solo album, which I didn't know he had until recently. So that's a big fan right there. Mike, the Angus, he's a huge fan of Angus. He mimics him in every way. He wakes up in the morning and he just starts playing Angus riffs all day, and that's stays in shape. And they've got the tone down. They've got the equipment down. The pick gauges, the string gauges, it's all the same. So that's how we try to get recreate the sound as much as possible.
Awesome. Now, Mark, I know that you in the past you've been in ICDC, but I know that you've been surrounded by that, and it's not just AC/DC that you're in love with. You love a lot of those Australian bands and that kind of sound. How long have you been around? And for those who don't know Mark, I'm going to give Mark a chance, but Mark's been around the block with us many, many times. Go ahead, Mark.
Yeah, I've been an AC/DC fan, since I was probably 12 or 13. When Back in Black came out, it blew my mind, and that's all I ever wanted to do was play stuff like that. I was in AC/DC when it wasn't necessarily cool, when everybody was in the Scorpions docking and stuff like that. I was still in AC/DC. So I go way back with the band. I've been in several different tributes. I always played the Malcolm part because to me, Malcolm's the key.
Oh, yeah.
Talk about the AC/DC sound. It's Malcolm. It's that Gretsch. It's those 12-gauge strings. It's the Marshall that he's plugged into. It's that whole thing that really, it's not him alone, of course. Angus is obviously a very important part of it, but it's those two guitars sounds together that make that AC/DC sound, and it's not the same if Malcolm's not there. But anyway, I'm a huge Malcolm fan. I played Malcolm in a couple different tributes, and that turned me on to other Australian rock. I discovered the Angels, or Angel City as they call them in the United States. I'm a huge Angels fan. Rose Tattoo, Status Quo. I mean, let's see who else. Screaming Jets, Jet. I just started going down the Australian rabbit hole with stuff and Australian pub rock, and just love that vibe, that sound, that attitude. There's a different attitude about that music. It's a punk attitude, but not a punk style of music. It's not the playing style, but the attitude is very much the same, and that very much appealed to me. And that kind of morphed along the way into what I'm doing now with Rat Rod. We are definitely, if you've heard any of our stuff, you can't help but say, yeah, they like AC/DC.
Just a little bit.
Yeah. You can't run from it. You can't run from your influences, no matter how hard you try. I did in my earlier years of playing original music. I ran from my influences, but come back home, and that's where I am right now. And again, not trying to copy anybody. It's just what comes out. And that's what we do now.
You're playing what you love.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So, I mean, the whole concept of the AC/DC Back in Black album, of course, it was a very pivotal moment in AC/DC. I'd like to argue that, and I don't think anyone would argue that had it not been for Back in Black, AC/DC, I don't think would have reached the superstardom that they reached. But just the whole concept of the album, we talked on the Beatles' White Album, there was nothing. Led Zeppelin, there was nothing on the cover. And here we go again, AC/DC Back in Black. I mean, it's just the name, the title of the album, straight black, and memorial for Bon Scott. I didn't even realize that until recently, that the whole concept behind that album being black was mourning for Malcolm. I mean, not Malcolm, sorry, for Bon Scott.
They had to fight
Yeah.
with Atlantic Records to get that cover too, by the way. Atlantic
Yeah.
was not happy about a pure black cover, which was originally what was proposed to them. They ended up agreeing, so long as the AC/DC logo was outlined, that the title of the album could just be embossed into the cover, and that's what they did. I mean, the version I had that I just held up, that's an original copy from 1980. I've had that one forever.
That was actually the second fight they had with Atlantic. They get in a fight over the Highway to Hell album too, because Atlantic hated the idea of that album cover for that
Yep.
one too.
Yep.
So they had a long history of not getting along with Atlantic, I think.
So we go into this album, I mean, with, of course, Hell's Bells, which there's so much history in this song. And the one thing that got me, and I'm going to bounce this off to you guys, is I went back and I re-listened to the album right before the show so that I could be fresh coming out of the music and what was on my mind about the music. But here you have a brand new singer in Brian Johnson who hasn't done anything yet, hasn't established anything yet. And you don't even hear his voice until almost 2 minutes into the song. I felt like that was almost done on purpose. What do you guys think?
I definitely think it was done on purpose. I definitely think they thought about that and said, you know what? People are wondering what we're going to sound like. Let's give them something, give them some anticipation, make them wait to that very last moment. Yeah, I definitely believe that was an intentional move.
And it kind of reassures the listener that the band still sounds the same.
Yeah.
They get a good long taste of the AC/DC sound before he comes in.
Yeah.
So, yeah,
Though it was so different sounding at the same time.
yeah, a little tighter, a little more produced, but still the core sound.
Yep.
There was go ahead, Bill. Sorry.
Oh, no problem. I was just going to say, you mentioned the production. The production is actually a key part of Back in Black, I think. I mean, the performances and the songs are fantastic, but they definitely did take a different turn in production. This was the second album with Mutt Lange, and so he was, I think, flexing his muscle a little bit as far as taking charge. But also what they did was to beef up the album in the mastering stage. In the mastering stage of making a record, they try to do two things. One is to add EQ and presence to the album to make it sound full, but they also try to do that in such a manner where the record will sound good on just about any type of equipment you might choose to play it on. From a boom box, your little earbuds to a top-end stereo system. In addition to Mutt Lange producing, Atlantic got a gentleman named Bob Ludwig to do the mastering. Bob Ludwig was a master of the mastering and mixing business going back to the late 60s. He was the guy that Atlantic brought in to master Led Zeppelin 2, for example, and helped to get the iconic sound on that one. This album just sounds fantastic.
Mhm.
I mean, and it sounds great on no matter what you play it on.
Yep.
Yeah, it's a great headphone out.
Absolutely. And the other thing that I'd never realized before I started doing a lot more in-depth research on this album was the theme behind Hell's Bells, with that being the storms that they were having there in the Bahamas where they were recording. The power would go out, and that's kind of where the inspiration came from. I never knew that. I always thought, AC/DC, Hell's usually related. There's some like real dark sounding stuff, but hearing some of the side stories kind of makes it even cooler.
Yeah, well, they had the titles for a lot of those songs before they had the lyrics. There's just, they bandied around titles. That Hell's Bells title they had, and Brian was, as the story goes at least, and there's conjecture on both sides of the stories. I'm just going to stick with the official account that as I know it. Brian was kind of charged with writing the lyrics based on a lot of the song titles, so they had that title, and that's when the whole inspiration of the storms and all that came about. So yeah, it was in the moment. It's a very in the moment kind of record.
Man, I just got to say the whole idea, and then the iconic bell that's part of the whole album, and the fact that they had to travel like ridiculous mileage just to get the sound of this bell. Yeah. And then I find out that the bell that they take on tour with them is actually an octave higher than what's on the album.
Well, the thing about what's on the album, if you watch it, there's an interview with Tony Platt, who was the engineer of the record. And they actually slowed the tape down half speed to get that tone that you have on the album. Because to make a bell as low as that is, it'd be twice as big as what they tour with.
Yep.
So yeah, they had to, because that bell that they had cast, and the reason why they had that bell cast was because they kept going to churches in England to try to record a bell, but every time they'd ring the bell, birds would flock off, and they'd have the bird sound as much as the bell sound in the recordings. Man. So they ended up casting a bell, and it was the wrong pitch. Well, it was the right pitch, but it was the wrong octave.
Right. So moving on from Hell's Bells, we go to Shoot to Thrill. Now, this was, I believe, for the longest time, that this was just a straight rock, like sexual themed song, to realize that this was actually a drug addicting song. This was written from some of the viewpoints of seeing some of the women that would be on drugs and then try and make a living off of that as well. So what do you guys know about Shoot to Thrill? Any thoughts on Shoot to Thrill?
I don't know anything about Shoot to Thrill.
I really hadn't heard that angle of it before, about the drug addiction angle. I just knew it was my favorite song on the album just because it kicks ass. So that's my experience with it.
Yeah.
That's my favorite song on the album too. And one of the things that is so beautiful about this record is how it's sequenced. I mean, the 1-2 punch of first Hell's Bells and Shoot to Thrill, two anthems, one right after the other. I mean, you're 10 minutes into this record, with those two songs over, and you're already out of breath. At least I was the first time I heard it.
Yep.
Yeah, I don't think there was a moment of weakness on this entire album.
I agree. There's not. I saw the interview with Brian Johnson. I think you're referring to, CT, and he did say something to the effect of he was got to thinking about all of the women in England with the whole Valium issues and trying to get away from the pressures or whatever it was, and that's where the one line "too many women, too many pills" comes from. Was from that thought process.
To me, it's kind of earth-shattering when you have a brand new guy who's replacing an iconic singer like Bon Scott, and the whole band just gives him full writing permission to go ahead and write whatever he wants. And to me, that's amazing. That takes a lot of trust and faith in somebody.
Yeah. It really does. And subsequent to this, some 10 years later, after Brian went through his divorce, Malcolm pretty much took over the lyric writing for the band himself. It's clear that he could have done this then if he had chosen to. He had the talent to do it. And as you point out, he didn't. He pretty much let Brian have his head. And considering that Brian was with the band at this point for all of a month, that's pretty incredible.
Yeah.
Well, a lot of the lyrics before Bon joined the band, Malcolm and Angus wrote a lot of the lyrics back in those days when Dave Evans was still singing with them.
Yep.
So they have the ability to write. They did do a lot of the writing. Whether there's conjecture out there whether how much of the lyrics on Back in Black were really written by Brian. And again, I don't think this is the time or place to talk about that necessarily, but there is question about that out there.
Yeah, I've heard those stories too. Nothing that I can hang my hat on is that this is absolutely true. So let's not guess about it.
Yeah. So, and then from that into a George Young titled song, "What Do You Do for Money, Honey?" And I found that out in the midst of doing this research that Big Brother George kind of gave the title to this one. And real sleazy on this one. What do you guys think?
Definitely sleazy. Yeah.
This is probably my favorite tune on the album. At least top 2 or 3. I just love the groove that this tune has. I love the way he sings. He's at the freaking stratosphere at the end of the song. I don't think he could go any higher when he belts that last line out.
Oh yeah.
And it's just a freaking killer track. I love it, and I loved playing it. When I played it in the tributes, I just loved playing this song because it always just fell right in the pocket when you played it too.
You know, one thing that always strikes me about Brian, and you're right, Mark, especially on this song, and possibly, I guess, on Shoot to Thrill, also near the end of it. I mean, Brian's definitely getting into the uppermost range of the male vocal voice. Some of that is, I'm sure, because of Mutt Lang egging him on. Mutt had a habit of wanting to get the vocal performance just right and making people go for it multiple times until he got what he wanted. I mean, he did this with AC/DC. I know there have been interviews with Joe Elliott of Def Leppard where he was ready to kill Mutt Lang when Def Leppard was recording Bring On the Heartache.
Yeah. Did you know that Mutt Lang was a vocalist?
I did.
Yeah, that's why. He was a vocalist. He knew from where he came.
Yes, he did.
And
it was because of that Bond stood up and took notice when Mutt tried to explain to him, this is how you breathe, this is how you phrase. You'll sound better if you do it the way I tell you to.
Yep, and he did.
Yep.
And then we go into probably one of the raunchiest songs on the album, "Giving the Dog a Bone." And what more can we say about "Giving the Dog a Bone," man? It's a straight up rocker but raunchy tune. To me, this was like pre Guns N' Roses type. Like I could have seen GNR writing a song like this. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah,
I think I took a lot of inspiration from this album for a lot of their stuff.
Oh yeah, Axl has said as much over the years. Yeah, how much he loves AC/DC, and he showed it, of course, when he played on stage with them for a while as well.
I think that 9 out of 10 bands out there would take an AC/DC B-side as their A-side any day.
Oh yeah,
and this falls into that category. This song is clearly a B-side track, but every other band on the planet would take it as their A-side.
Yeah, absolutely. And then we got, well, you know, I was reading an article about this next song earlier today, and they were talking about how this definitely would not have been made in this current Me Too generation that we're swinging through with the "Let Me Put My Love Into You," which is kind of like borderline rapish.
Oh yeah, I mean, you're talking about "Giving the Dog a Bone" being raunchy, and I'm thinking, and you're ignoring the next song after it.
Just two birds, 2 feathers on the same bird.
Yeah, pretty much. And then, of course, that's the end of side 1.
Yep.
And then kicking off side 2 is the theme to the whole album, "Back in Black." And I had read somewhere that Malcolm had actually come up with the riff, but had sat on it for a few weeks before he showed it to anybody, kind of thinking it sounded like shit. But he showed it to Angus, and Angus was like, "Yo, keep that. That's great."
Yeah, he says, "Well, I'll take it."
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, we've seen "Back in Black" now used in cartoons. We've seen it used in movies, commercials. "Back in Black" has to be one of the most commercially used AC/DC songs, I would think.
Between it and Hell's Bells, yeah. I mean, I don't think it can go to an NFL game without hearing Hell's Bells.
Yeah.
"Back in Black" is almost like universally accepted because musically it's very appealing. You know, the E major progression, very happy sort of sounding. It's got a groove that you can't escape from, and it's, dare I say, a bit like rap in a way, particularly in the verses.
Yeah.
So it kind of fits a lot of different genres in one genre in and of itself.
What do you think of this song, Rick?
I like it a lot. I was learning to sing it for the band. It was a bit of a challenge for me because I do mostly Bon Scott. But that one, once I got that down, all the rest of them came kind of easier to me.
Gotcha.
I figured out how to get the scream down without blowing my voice out. But it took
So-
a good months to get that down without really destroying my voice. But it's just a great anthem song. I love doing it.
Hats off to you for being able to sing anything Brian Johnson does, man.
Yeah.
That's easy.
Hell yeah. And Rick, you did a great job at it too, man. Let me tell you. And it to me, we talked about the first two songs on the album, Hell's Bells and Shoot the Thrill, being like first two umps. Then you get it again on side 2 because you follow up Back in Black, which Shook Me All Night Long, which is probably the biggest single off the album.
Mm-hmm.
A little bit more popish, a little bit more fluffy, if anything from AC/DC can be considered fluffy. But what do you guys think about Shook Me All Night Long?
It is definitely the most polished song I think they've ever done. They spent a lot of time on this. I don't know. I've never read anywhere where they have, but you can tell. You can tell they spent a ton of time on this record, on this particular song, getting this exactly right. All the way down to just the way Angus's guitar sounds on the riff when it's just him and the drums. Not going on the technical side of it, you can just tell that there's a lot of effort put into making sure that it's just right. And I don't know. I think it's the perfectly produced AC/DC song, but at the same time, if I'm being honest, I don't need to hear it ever again.
Right.
I've heard it so much.
I think
I'm sure we've all heard it thousands of times over the last 40 years at this point. Yeah.
I think most AC/DC true fans feel the same way.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if you go see them live, this is like the time to go use the bathroom. Like,
Yeah, we played McStew's back in November, I believe, and we went to do that song. Someone from the back of the room yelled out, "Don't play that crap! Play something else."
oh wow.
Yeah. Or
Never had anyone tell us to not play one of the songs. That was we played it last time right into Have a Drink on Me. We always go right into that riff because people love it right off the album like that.
Yep, that's the way to do it. And when we ever did it, that was always a crowd favorite amongst the women. The girls and women just love to dance to that tune.
Yeah.
So we knew we were going to get a dance crowd when we did Shook Me.
Oh yeah.
We'd end up usually a lot of times we'd end up doing Girls Got Rhythm and then Shook Me All Night Long because there's almost 10 minutes of girls dancing right there.
There you go.
Full all night, yeah.
Yep.
One thing that's so cool about this song and also Back in Black leading into it, you talk about AC/DC, and of course there's a lot of focus on Malcolm and Angus. Cliff Williams on those two songs is playing such a great line on both of the tracks. I mean, it's not what I'd call terribly complicated. I mean, as a bass player, I look at it and I marvel at it because it's not complex, but it's subtle enough and it's just so perfectly placed. It's very, very well done.
It's clever.
Yeah.
It's clever in music that's not necessarily clever all the time.
Yep.
It's exactly the way it needs it, which is a good bass player. So.
And
somebody already brought up Have a Drink on Me. This I believe was this was Brian's kind of toast to Bon Scott. I think this was kind of like him kind of following in Bon's tradition. Now that's always the way that I took it. What do you guys think? I looked at it as a good fun drinking song, but I looked at it as kind of like a toast to Bon.
Yeah, I think there's something to be said for that. Yeah, I don't know what was in his head. I haven't seen or read anything particular about it. You very well could be right. But just looking at the lyrics for what they are, yeah, it's just a good fun party song, hey, good on you, have a drink on me, it's kind of that kind of thing. And it fits the music perfectly.
Yeah, I can read. It is just a great drinking song, and every good album needs a good drinking song.
Hell yeah. Absolutely. And then that's followed up by what I think, and you guys can argue with me if you want. I think it's probably the weakest track on the album with Shake a Leg. I never was big into the song itself. What do you guys? How do you feel about it?
I tend to agree with you. I mean, it's probably the only song from the album I've never heard on the radio.
Yeah, that is true. We have never heard that on the radio. But I just love the riff. I like the way it comes. I like the way it sounds. I like everything about it.
I love playing the song.
Album.
I'm sorry. I didn't mean to chomp on you there.
That's right.
I love playing the song. It's always a fun tune to play. Again, Brian's singing way up there, particularly towards the end of the track. And I read somewhere, I can't remember where I read it, and it could be wrong, so I might be spreading false rumors here, so take it for what it's worth. But I read somewhere that he did that track in one take.
Wow.
So if that's the case, holy shit.
Yeah, you're 100% right on that.
Because although it is a B side, it's a badass beat. I'll take it as my A side if they don't want it.
Well, if that's your weak song, that's pretty good.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, yeah, I agree with that 100%. Like I said, if there's anything that could be weak on this at all, but my favorite track on the album is the last one, "Rock and Roll Ain't Noise Pollution." That's one of my. There's just. We talked about groove. We talked about, I read a little bit about his ad-libbed intro, Brian's ad-libbed intro into this, which was taken on like the first take. And he didn't even write it, didn't think about it, just said whatever came to his mind. And I love "Rock and Roll Ain't Noise Pollution." What do you guys take with that one?
This particular song to me is one of the things, one thing AC/DC, if you really listen to their albums, particularly the earlier ones, but if you listen to the albums, particularly with headphones on, there's always little Easter eggs in there that you can hear. Little imperfections, little things that aren't quite right. Like Phil Rudd's bass drum pedal squeaking on the jack. It's in there. They left it. Guitar noise, 60 cycle hum or whatever between songs or whatever. On this song, if you listen to it with headphones on, you can hear Brian crack open a pack of cigarettes, take it out, put it in his mouth, light it, take a drag, blow it out, clear his voice, and then belt. It's all in there.
Now I'm going to go listen to that right after this show, man. Like, wow. And the fact that he was smoking and could belt it the way that he was belting it on some of the tracks that we've already discussed is like mind-blowing to me.
Yeah.
He does have an amazing voice. I heard somewhere when he would do sound check, he'd basically take a swig of Jack Daniels, go up to the microphone and go, okay,
man.
That was check. So, I don't know.
It almost sounds effortless on this album.
Yeah.
And thinking about the register he's singing in, I know I sure as hell couldn't do it.
No, I can't. I can do it for like 2 seconds. That's why hats off to you, Rick, for being able to sing a complete song or several, because
Thanks.
I thought I'd blow my voice out in 2 seconds.
Yeah, when I started out, I was just doing the Bon Scott, maybe one or two Brian Johnsons. I think I'm up to maybe 7 or 8 Brian Johnson songs I can do now. So it's coming along. It's getting easier and easier. So. I was like my raspier from doing the Bon Scott. So.
Yeah.
Man, I got to say, just to touch base on, I want to talk a little bit about Rick's band and Mark's band a little bit, and the tie-in to the music. Rick, I got to say, when I saw you guys a few weeks ago, it was you guys were awesome, and the Bon Scott really shows clearer on your voice. Loved the whole denim jacket. I mean, that's the basics of it all. Like that takes it back to me, like to what rolling up the cigarette pack in your sleeve, like that's what rock and roll is to me.
Yeah. We're still kind of low budget though. I think that jacket is actually my fiance's from when she was in high school.
Oh, wow.
Cool.
So that's where I got the jacket from. I mean, we're kind of down to earth. Like, I mean, there's other tribute bands out there that are high production. They've got all the stage stuff, and we got some stage stuff too. We got cannons built. We've got smoke machines. We've got all that stuff. We've got a bell, but we're not big production kind of people. But we still put on a big show.
And that was kind of the simplicity with AC/DC, was it not?
I like it is the simplicity, and we're kind of like that. I mean, we're all kind of like the people we play in the band, so we kind of carry that vibe through the show.
Yeah, I haven't had a chance to catch you live, but I have seen video of what you do, and you guys are really good, man. Sound great.
Actually, you have seen us live. We were at the Golden Nugget a couple of years back for the Battle of the Bands that you guys were in. That's where I met you before.
Son of a gun. That's right. Oh, I forgot all about that.
Yeah, we were called Voltage back then.
Oh, okay. That's why I'm thinking of it. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, darn. I'm sorry. I'll just take my foot out of my mouth now.
So, I mean, Mark, you take the AC/DC route to the point that you still play the Gretsch, even though you're not like doing the AC/DC tribute thing anymore. I know how near and dear to your heart the Gretches are.
Well, yeah.
Sound.
Yeah, and again, going back to Malcolm's sound, that's where his sound comes from, is from the Gretsch guitar. And I fell in love with it doing Malcolm. I have my own Malcolm guitar. I bought one of the signature models when they came out, and I built my own version of it before the official ones came out. I just loved how they sounded. Obviously, I didn't want to go out doing my own thing with a Malcolm guitar. That's just freaking weird. Maybe it's not, but I would feel that it's weird. But so I wanted to do something with a Gretsch because I just love how they sound. So I just happened to stumble across what I use now, which is a Gretsch anniversary model. I was playing an AC/DC gig, and the guy came up to me and said, "Hey, I've got an old Gretsch for sale if you want to buy it." I went, "Yeah," and I bought it for $50. It was just a piece of crap, and I glued it back together and threw a Filtertron in it, and boom, it's my main guitar, and that's a 1961. I bought two since then. I got two 68s that I used. I have them set up the exact same way, one pickup and one pot. That's it.
That's awesome.
And I don't play rhythm guitar in this band. I play lead in this band, so it's not like I'm copping Angus or copping Malcolm completely, but I still definitely tip my hat to both of them.
So one question I got to ask now that we've discussed Back in Black, and you, Mark, you said earlier that the whole idea behind Malcolm and it not being the same without Malcolm. Any take on the newest album from AC/DC?
It's really good. Got a lot of good tracks on it. They are much older now, obviously, and they're not the hungry kids they were 40 years ago. So you've got to take that into account. They did as good an album as they could possibly do at their age, and I think it rated, in my personal opinion, pretty high. I gave it a good solid 8.5 out of 10 when I first listened to it. I thought there was a lot of great tracks on it. I thought Stevie is doing a great job. He's a fan of his uncle. He actually so much as wanted to be his uncle in a way, because he had a band in the 80s called Starfighter where he played rhythm guitar, and it was guitar pretty much just like Malcolm's because Malcolm gave it to him. So
wow,
he keeps it honest. And he does a good job doing basically tributing Malcolm for real. And I saw them on the last tour with Stevie playing, and he does a good job that way too live. So I thought it was a good record. It's no Back in Black, and nothing ever will be.
Right, of course. What do you, Rick and Bill? Any thoughts on Power Up? Did you get the chance to listen to it? Any thoughts?
Yeah, I've listened to it. I like a lot of the tracks on it. I like Witch's Brew. I like some of the some of the albums they've come up with in the past, like maybe in the 90s, early 2000s, that didn't sell all that well. Because a lot of songs, some people say were more like filler just to get the album out. This one doesn't seem to have a whole lot of filler on it. It's got a lot of good meaty songs on it, and it's back to form, I thought.
Yeah, I agree with you.
70, that's pretty damn good. I mean, if that's what they can come up with at 70, that's I'm really impressed.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
I remember reading when the album came out that they went digging through the vaults and found a lot of material that Malcolm had written some years back prior to his death. And it shows. I mean, that vibe is definitely there on that album. In a way, almost, and not to say I want AC/DC to go away. I mean, I would love them to be around for as long as I'm around. But in a way, it would be a fitting end if they decided that they weren't going to go any farther than this, if they don't have any more Malcolm songs to be able to include on the albums. Because his writing style is just so solid and so identifiable.
Yeah, it could go out on top of this album, I think.
I agree. And that one of the last videos they did, I don't remember the order, might not be the exactly last video, but one of the last ones was for the tune Through the Mist of Time. Never in my life have I seen or heard anything of AC/DC that came close to putting a lump in my throat or a tear in my eye. But that tune did, and that video did.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's
for sure.
probably my favorite off the album.
Yeah.
Now, going back to Back in Black for just a moment, though, you mentioned videos, Mark. One thing that was interesting about Back in Black for me when it first came out in the summer of 1980 was they made a ton of videos to go with that album. I mean, they had done promotional videos previously, but I'm guessing in part because of the fact that they had Brian now fronting them and they wanted to show off what he could do. I think they made like 6 videos for this record.
I'm sitting here looking at the song list. I'm going, yeah, there's Hell's Bells. They did one for. They did one for Money. They did one for Let Me Put My Love Into You. They did one for Back in Black. They did one for Shook Me.
They did 2 for Shook Me.
Well, the second one came out during the
Maximum Overdrive.
They reissued it, or re-released it, not released it. But yeah, for the Back in Black, I think you're right, like 5 or 6 videos. They were all done at the same time, all soundstage videos, but still.
Yeah. I mean, they're all wearing the same clothes. It was the same approach. But considering that MTV wasn't even on the air in the summer of 1980.
Yeah, you were getting to see this on like, previews for like Night Flight or freaking Don Kirshner's Rock concert or something. Someplace you'd see videos like this.
Man, they might have been thinking that MTV thing way before MTV was thinking of it.
Well, the Beatles thought Ticket to Ride was considered to be one of the first music videos.
Yeah.
Back in, 66, I guess they did that? I don't know.
Yeah.
That was considered one of the first MTV-worthy videos 30 years
ago. Yeah, I remember seeing the Beatles Help as well, and there being parts of that movie that seemed like videos to the song.
Yeah. Even in A Hard Day's Night, there are some sections in that one, too. I mean, there was a lot that was done in the Beatles films that a lot of people, for want of a better way of putting it, ripped off over the course of the years. I mean, the Monkees TV series was all about the song videos that were interspersed in the plot.
Yeah,
I think you'd be hard pressed to find anything that the Beatles did that wasn't ripped off by somebody.
That's right. That's 100% right.
So important. The Beatles are probably the most important band ever in rock music.
I don't think there's any question of that.
I've always said that I don't trust anybody that doesn't have appreciation for the Beatles.
Yeah,
right.
Exactly.
Like it's saving your life.
You could not. I mean, if you don't like them, I get it. But if you don't appreciate them, that's a different story to me.
Yeah.
So, but Rick, as far as Whole Lotta AC/DC, how do people go about finding your pages and some upcoming shows and stuff that people can latch onto?
Okay, well, we're on Facebook under, what are we under? Whole Lotta AC/DC Tribute Band, I think it's under. Yep. We have a website too, right? I'm asking
acdctribute.live.
acdctribute.live is our website. We got some shows coming up. We got the Ardmore Music Hall in a couple weeks. We got Rose Tree Park Summer Concert Series in July 9th.
Nice.
We got Gus's Crab House near Middletown, Delaware. We got Metal in the Mountains on June 8th, which is 4 tribute bands. We got a Dio band, a Judas Priest band, an Ozzy band, and us.
Nice.
All day event. So, yeah, we got a few coming up. So.
Very cool.
And how about you guys, Mark? I know you have a couple upcoming things going on too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you can find everything out we got going on at our website, which is ratrodrocks.com. But yeah, we're starting this Friday. We're not starting. We've been playing, but first one coming up is this Friday. We're at the Fire in Philly. We're there with Instinct and a couple other bands. It's an original showcase there. And then next Saturday, the 30th, we are at Timeout 2 in Westville. Nice. Yeah, there's going to be a big pre-festival festival, I guess you could say. There's 7 bands playing. It's the pre-show basically for the Wampus Cat Festival, which is happening down in North Carolina second weekend of May. And that is actually the next show after the April 30th shows. We're headed to North Carolina to play down there to do that. And then, we got stuff going on after that. We're going to be in Pittsburgh in June. We're just trying to spread stuff out. And
sounds great, man.
Spread out that Rat Rod Rock and Roll, our version of best stuff there is.
And, I'd be remiss if I didn't include Bill with Legion of Prague. Any upcoming stuff, Bill?
We are We don't have anything on the calendar in the very near future here. We're going to take some time to get some new songs under our belt and revamp our show a little bit. We've been very busy over the course of the last several months and also had a couple of personnel changes. So we're trying to get things a little bit settled down.
Gotcha. And how do people keep up to date with Legion of Prague?
LegionofPrague.com, which is also a link to our Facebook page. We have a YouTube channel as well, but most of the videos are available on either platform.
Awesome. And so as we close out this Back in Black, any last words on this album, gentlemen?
Rick, I'll let you go first. John?
It's just a must-have for any collection, whether you're a fan of rock and roll or not. It just covers every genre. Every song on it is great. It's just a people pleaser all around, I think.
I'd say if you don't know anything about Back in Black at this point, where the hell you been?
Yeah, right.
This is one of the greatest rock albums of all time. It's just every song is great. I mean, you don't have to be an AC/DC fan to love the songs on this record. So if there is that one person in the planet that hasn't heard this thing yet, get it and listen to it. My God.
I wouldn't be the least bit surprised if in another 30, 40 years from now, the people are still listening to it. It's just that terrific a record.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Man. So, guys, thank you so much for being here with us tonight. Bill, it's been a pleasure as always. Guys, Rick, Mark, thank you so much. And guys, we will be back next week. Next week, we're going to be doing Dark Side of the Moon with a nice Pink Floyd tribute called Brain Damage. So make sure you tune in. Make sure you like us, share us on Facebook, and much love to all you guys. We'll talk soon. And don't just leave it. Leave it better. Have a great week, guys.
Take good care, guys. Thanks.
Yeah. Thank you. Thanks for having us.